I hate batteries sometimes. They just run out at the worst times, and there's nothing you can do about it. Okay, back to where we were. So, learning outcomes tend to be superior, at least equal if not superior, in intensive learning classes. What about other factors? What about student motivation? It's much higher in intensive classes. Whoa. Even at the end of course, it's much higher. Student course evaluations of the course itself, higher in intensive learning classes versus traditional classes. Whoa. Why do they think that is? Okay, ponder for a minute again. Do 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 do. It's because in intensive learning classes, professors are much more likely to use active learning and experiential learning approaches. They're much less likely to just lecture and more likely to get up and have the students doing stuff and moving around and actively engaging with the material. And that seems to be the critical moderator variable as far as high levels of student motivation at the end of class. Workload tends to be even across the classes. It's not like a dumbing down of material or less material covered or less work expected. Critical thinking, there was this, I'm going to say that's too early to call. I don't want to go one way or the other. If anything, a slight edge for the more intensive classes promoting critical thinking, but I'm not going to hang my hat on that one. What about levels of stress and fatigue? They're much higher in classes that are intensive. Students say, and professors say, these are more likely to promote burnout. So I hear that. That's a negative, so we want to definitely keep that in mind. There's a couple problems here we have, okay? One problem we have is in academia we want people to do things, not just good things, but we want them to do them for the right reason. We get really hung up on this. So most students say, I'm taking an intensive course because of convenience or scheduling or flexibility. We don't like that answer. We want them to say they're taking it because they're going to have greater learning outcomes. And that's not what students say. They say convenience and schedule and flexibility. Personally, what do I think about that? I don't care. I don't care. It's a legitimate issue, right? I do things every day for convenience and schedule and flexibility. So why would I discount the students' motivations to do the same? You think I do everything for higher, lofty, aspirational goals on Maslow's triangle? No, dude. Sometimes I'm way at the bottom. So I respect it. The other problem we got is professors. They're a big problem. Yeah, it's kind of embarrassing. So professors argue that intensive courses, by and large professors are really negative about intensive learning classes. Professors argue that I can't cover the same amount of material, their classes are a dumbing down version, the students don't learn as much. By and large, professors are wrong. Professors also argue that certain subjects can't be taught in an intensive format, and they'll say geology or written languages or French or English or whatever, math, can't be taught in this intensive course format. The literature doesn't support it. The literature suggests everything can be taught in an intensive course format. And that the argument goes, some subjects just take more time for absorption. That's not true. There's not good research for it. That's a challenge, right? Now we have another issue. What about long-term learning? The geology question, back again with us, right? Long-term learning tends to be poor in both of our regular classes, traditional classes, and intensive classes. In other words, what students retain about the information, it's pretty much diddly squat years later. We don't remember very much. I don't think, by the way, that's a fault of the students. Don't hear me on that. I think that's a fault of the way our classes are designed and our learning, experiential learning activities and our assessments and all these other course design questions that we're talking about right now. I think it's a bigger reflection on a faculty failure than on a student failure. But if you don't continue to engage in the skills, you will lose them. That's clear, and that sits on all of us, right? So geology for me. I love rocks. I live with the creek. Oh man, you can almost see it. There it is, out back. You can't really see it, but there's a creek that runs right there. See, that's our property going out to the red barn. So there's a creek that runs out back, and the creek is full of rocks. It's full of rocks that are 350 to 400 million years old, that are from the Devonian period, when the whole state of Kentucky and Indiana was covered by an underground sea, and so mostly they're corals. And so I know a lot about these rocks, right? And I've continued to learn about rocks. I buy geology books for fun, okay? So my knowledge of geology has stayed over the years because I engage in long-term learning about geology. It interests me. Chemistry. I don't feel the same love for chemistry. I know nothing about chemistry, and even the D I got in high school chemistry will be sadly reflected by less lack of knowledge even now. It's a sad world because I haven't done anything. I started drawing the mole people the day we talked about moles. I drew a mole family, and pretty much ever since then I never knew what a mole was except the little mole family that I drew. And then, yeah, that's my whole knowledge of chemistry right there. Okay, but so we have this problem in terms of, now I'm going back to the subject matter, right? So we have a problem as far as long-term learning and designing classes that promote long-term learning. We have a problem with faculty biases as far as what we think works and doesn't and what we understand about learning. And we have a problem with not using active learning in our classes. So we have like some issues that we need to sort through. Anyway, sorry we wandered a little bit. Sorry about the, battery issue, but that's what I wanted to talk to you about. So, as we conclude this video, I wrote some proposals about what do I think we need to do in regards to this situation. And I would love for you to entertain that question too, because what do you think we should do in regards to the university's decision about 8 to 6 weeks? How does that, or 6 to 8 weeks, how do these things affect that, and how should we move forward? And I have some real specific ideas that I'm happy to tell you if you want to hear them. But in general, I want you to think of, how do you make big decisions based on administrative decisions, and what kind of questions would you ask, and how would you move forward, and specifically how would you suggest Spalding move forward on this issue? So we can talk about it more in class if you want. Oh, we don't have to. We can talk about other stuff because there's so many cool things to talk about. Why would you want to stop talking? Because the video